Evening, I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to tonight's video presentation. And I'm titling tonight's video presentation Signs, Signs, Everywhere Signs. Of course, if you're used to driving on the roads each day, you're seeing all these different signs here that I have on the title page. Road work ahead, the interstate signs, workers ahead, no U-turns here. And just like with the road signs, the atmosphere also provides us signs of the weather that is to come. And so in tonight's video, we're going to go ahead and examine those signs for the upcoming weather forecast. All right, so first let's start with a little bit of a review mode. I'm taking data from the PRISM Climate Group at Oregon State University, and we're looking at the anomalies of temperatures. This is December 2022 on the left, and this is January, this past month, January of 2023. Blue shading indicating below normal temperatures, and then the oranges and the lighter white brownish color here indicates much above normal temperatures. Again, green, purple, and blue are below normal. But in general, and when we look at this, by the way, these are the mean temperatures, the average temperature balanced out over the entire month. So we're not looking at, departures from normal for high temperatures or departure from normals from low temperatures. We're looking at the actual mean temperature, average temperature departures from normal. And so we look at December here on the left, and what do we see? We see this deep purple coloring over Montana and the parts of the Dakotas, where it was much below normal, on the order of 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. And then the blue coloring extended all the way across the Midwest, right onto the Mid-Atlantic. In Mid-Atlantic in December, we saw temperatures on the order of 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. Not significantly frigid by any stretch outside of that Christmas holiday period. But generally just slightly below normal across the Mid-Atlantic. And then even up the northern portions of New England in December, it was above normal. If you look at Maine, for example, it was a good 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in Maine in December. So quite a mild Maine if you live up there. Look at the graphic here on the right. Things have changed drastically in the month of January. From December to January, look at all these bright orange colors now in the eastern United States. And look at this light brown coloring here across the upper Midwest from Wisconsin to Illinois, the lower portion of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, right on to Pennsylvania, up to New England. We have temperatures ranging from 9 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, the mean or average temperature over the entire month. And those warmer than normal temperatures also occurred across the Mid-Atlantic on the order of 6 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal across Virginia, North Carolina, and then also down here in the deep south, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee and Missouri, also much above normal. Now in January, we saw the lighter blue colorings and greens here indicating below normal temperatures. The below normal temps were across the southwestern United States. So a big change between December temperature anomalies and January on the right. If I break this down more locally to the Hampton Roads, Virginia area, and this is the one slide I'm going to break down more locally. If we look at the January mean temperatures over the past 5 years, just looking at the month of January over the past 5 years for the Hampton Roads cities in Virginia. In general, we look at January 2019, the mean temperature was 42.1 degrees Fahrenheit, just slightly below normal by 1/10 of a degree Fahrenheit. January 2020, look at how much this changed between January 19 and January 20. January 2020, the mean temperature was 46.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And look how much above normal it was. 6.3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. A very warm January back in 2020 for the Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. Next, we look at January 2021. And look at this. The temperature dropped again. It was fairly cold. That was a fairly cold January. This was the first year of La Nina, by the way, in 2020, the 2020 and 2021 winter season. 41.1 degree Fahrenheit mean temperature. But surprisingly, we were slightly above normal at this point, 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in January of 2021. And then January 2022, look how cold it was in January of 2022, last January. The mean temperature was 39.1 degrees Fahrenheit, which was actually 3.1 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. And then finally, this January, just this past month, the average or mean temperature was 48.7 degrees Fahrenheit for Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. And that, again, is now 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Okay? So really, out of the past 5 Januaries, really January 2022 was the one that really was the most below normal. We look at January 2019, that's not very much off the average at all, just a tenth of a degree. And then we've had a couple really warm Januaries over the last 5 years in 2020 and 2023. We look at the snowfall accumulations over the past 5 years for Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. And look at this. January 2019, we had near normal temperatures, but we didn't get any accumulated or measurable snowfall. We look at January 2020, we see that, again, no snowfall, accumulated snowfall or measurable snowfall for that January. And that was a very warm January, so that makes a lot of sense. So for the most part, we got liquid precipitation in January of 2020 because of how warm anomalously warm the temperatures were. We look at January 2021, the first La Nina winter of 3 in a row here. Notice we got 3.5 inches of measurable snowfall in January of 2021. That was back around the 28th of January. And then January 2022, look at this whopping number, 10.2 inches of snow for Hampton Road cities in the second La Nina winter, over 10 inches of snow. We had 2 specific storm systems, 2 distinct ones, one around the 21st, 22nd of January, and the other the 28th to 29th of January in 2022. And then this January, just last month, again, we're sitting at a 0. No measurable snowfall. The third La Nina winter. So if you look at La Nina, and usually it's a below normal snowfall type of winter during La Nina winters for the Mid-Atlantic. But look, we had a streak going there, 2 winters in a row, specifically 2 Januaries in a row during La Nina where we actually had measurable snowfall in the Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. Only one of the 3 in January did not have any measurable snowfall, and that was this year. And again, look, no surprise. Look how above normal the temperatures were after a very frigid Christmas, by the way. Let's take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, the latest. Blue coloring on the graphic here on the left showing below normal water temperatures, the orange coloring indicating above normal water temperatures. So a major thing that sticks out right away is that continuing La Nina right here across the central equatorial Pacific area. But you notice these colors, here's the scale here, by the way, on the right. You notice these blue colors aren't that dark. They're not as dark as they used to be. They're a little bit lighter now, the blue coloring. So that generally indicates that our water temperatures, really in that Nino 3.4 region, which is generally sitting right in here, they're generally running as of today at just minus 9/10 of a degree Celsius below normal. So, we had a couple dips over the winter. Let's just look back here on this graph on the right. Let's go back to early December. You notice we have the sea surface temperature anomalies in degrees Celsius there, that Nino 3.4 region, generally running slightly greater than 1 degree Celsius below normal in the moderate La Nina territory. Then you see a little bit of recovery, warming of those temperatures, water temperatures there between December 23rd and January 1st. But then we had another cooling effect around January 6th. Drop back down to moderate strength La Nina, then back up towards that border between weak and moderate strength La Nina. So it's been doing a lot of ups and downs. Look at the trend of this blue line here, the blue dots. But bottom line here is La Nina is still hanging on. We're sitting here on February 3rd of 2023. La Nina is still hanging on. It's holding on for dear life, really, because things have changed here. Right off the west coast of South America, off Peru, we're starting to see warming waters now. See the lighter orange coloring here? And that was not in existence earlier this winter, nor the past 2 winters. You had more of the blues going all the way to the South American coast. So the waters across the Pacific, definitely lighter orange coloring, indicating, anomalous, above normal water, but not super anomalously above normal. So the waters have cooled over the course of the winter with, we had that major Pacific jet stream, that big fire hose of moisture there into early January. A lot of the storms with the wave the wave action or the wind action, the wind blows the waves around, really kicks them up. It stirs up the water and really mixes it up pretty well. It's an efficient process of distributing the cooler temperatures from the subsurface up towards the surface. When you get a lot of storm and wind action, a lot of high winds tend to make these seas more choppy, and the water's cool. So the Pacific waters have cooled. Looking over here off the East Coast, I mean, these brighter oranges are showing much anomalously above normal water. Gulf of Mexico off the southeast coast, all the way up off the coast of New England. It's well above normal. The Western Atlantic Ocean basin this winter is much above normal. Okay, let's continue. Let's look at the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the ENSO forecast. Okay. So in general, this is the diagram on the left provided by IRI, the International Research Institute. This was updated last on 19 January of 2023, just a couple weeks ago. These are the various different climate model predictions showing where we're at now and where we're going. And so if we look at, this is the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomaly graph in degrees Celsius. These values here in the y-axis in the far left range from negative 2.5 up to positive 3 degrees Celsius. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a general upward trend expected to reach ENSO neutral conditions there generally in the March-April time period. And then we're seeing a lot of these model projections that are going into the positive territory above normal water now in the Nino 3.4 region. This black solid line, by the way, this horizontal black line represents no departure from normal. This is the average line of where the temperature should be, or the water temperature should be in that Nino 3.4 region. So all of these model projections are forecasting for a weak El Nino. This La Nina will continue to fade as we work our way into the spring, and eventually we're going to work our way to ENSO neutral conditions. When you see these model projections between positive 0.5 degrees Celsius above normal to negative 0.5 degrees Celsius below normal, right in that range is where you have ENSO neutral conditions. And so we're definitely expecting ENSO neutral conditions right onto the border of a weak El Nino by the fall. And that's the latest forecast. We look at the NOAA Climate Prediction Center ENSO probabilities. This was also issued in January on the right. Blue vertical bars indicate La Nina. The gray vertical bars is ENSO neutral conditions, so neither La Nina nor El Nino when you see the gray bar. And then the red vertical bar here indicates El Nino conditions. The y-axis over here on the left from 0 to 100 is the percent chance of these conditions occurring, the probability of occurrence. And so you see where we are now in February. You notice that the La Nina, the probability is decreasing. February, March, April, we see ENSO neutral conditions, chance now above 70% for the February, March, April time period. And then that's even a stronger signal for ENSO neutral conditions in March, April, and May into the spring. Over 80% chance of ENSO neutral conditions. Watch what happens over time now. See the gray bar, how the vertical extent of it gets shorter and shorter over time. As we get towards August, September, and October here on the far right, you actually see the red vertical bar, the greater probability of El Nino over ENSO neutral conditions by the fall. So this is something we'll have to watch closely. That could definitely have a completely different bearing on next winter for the Mid-Atlantic with a weak El Nino in place, if this does verify. Now keep in mind, these are all just model projections. Okay, this is nothing etched in stone, but it's just something that the Climate Prediction Center monitors, and they do a weekly update every Monday. Now let's take a look at some of the major factors that are really playing with our weather right now. First one is the Madden Julian oscillation, MJO. Here is the forecast. Over here on the far left is the Jeffs V12 model. The middle graphic here represents the European model. And the far right indicates the GFS operational forecast for the MJO. Let's start over here on the left. This is the Jeffs V12, the GFS ensemble, and look at where it's going. Okay, we're in pretty strong magnitude phase 3 of the MJO, rotating by the 9th of February into phase 4 for the Jeffs V12 model, and then working our way, rotating MJO into phase 5 by the 11th, the 11th and definitely the 12th of February. And then the Jeffs V12 has MJO rotating into a weaker phase 6, and then eventually working its way into weaker phase 7. Now, keep in mind this forecast on the Jeffs V12 on the left goes out to 17 February, so it's a 2-week forecast. Now, the European, on the other hand, you'll see here where we're at here around the 3rd of February, this red line here, showing it into a weaker phase 3, and then rotating in briefly into phase 4, but then going to the null phase. The European model shows it going back to the null phase, and then rotating into phases 6 and 7, where you have the enhanced convection over the Western Pacific. So there's a difference in opinion here between the Jeffs V12 on the left and the European model here on the middle. And then the GFS forecast is this like lighter blue line here. It's showing MJO from phase 3 to 4 to 5, and it's much weaker. It's not as strong. Actually, you compare the green line here on this chart is the Jeffs V12. So you notice how the Jeffs V12 is greater magnitude in phases 4 and 5 with convection over the maritime continent. So big difference here. GFS is less robust, let's say, for the MJO in phases 4 and 5 as compared to Jeffs. Now, what do these mean? What do these phases mean? Why are these important? Okay. I call this forecast 4, 5, and 6 phases. I call that the warmer phases of the MJO. And this is why I call it that. I'm focused right here in the Mid-Atlantic. That's where I'm looking. These are the MJO Temperature Composites, which show your departures from normal for the MJO. And so if it's yellow or orange, it's generally above normal temperatures are favored in these MJO phases. If you see the bright orange, that's really a strong signal that we see above normal air temperatures, above normal temps. If you see the blue coloring, that indicates below normal temps, okay? So there's a difference. MJO phase 4, look how much of the country is in the yellow and the orange coloring. Milder than normal temps are favored. Outside of the upper Midwest here in the Northern Plains. MJO phase 5, you got a little bit more colder air, potentially below normal temps across the upper Midwest, stretching further south towards Missouri and Illinois, and even over towards New England, actually, in phase 5, for the MJO temperature composites, is more favorable for below normal, but the Mid-Atlantic is still milder than normal. And then phase 6 is just ridiculously warm. If we go into phase 6 in any kind of magnitude here, fairly strong magnitude, this is what you get in the months of February, March, and April. All right. So if we go into phase 6, you can pretty much say there's absolutely no more chances for winter weather this year, pretty much, if we were just looking at MJO alone. Now let's look at the Teleconnections, the latest forecast. I decided to use the Jeffs GFS Ensemble V12 for this in tonight's video. Starting with the Arctic Oscillation 30 perturbed member forecast. We're sitting here at the 3rd of February right here. We're slightly negative on the AO right now, but then you see this climb to the positive side right on through the 10th. So basically the next week, the AO goes positive before going generally around average or near neutral conditions, and then just slightly positive. Not significantly positive, just slightly positive, all the way out through 19 February. We look at the Jeffs V12 NAO 30 perturbed member forecast here in the upper right. We see a general neutral condition NAO today that changes to more positive, kind of mirroring what the AO is doing over here, and then goes back down towards average or neutral conditions through the 13th of February, and then back slightly positive, very similar to AO. Okay. Looking at the EPO, Eastern Pacific Oscillation Forecast, Jeffs V12 30 perturbed members in the bottom left, showing a positive phase of the EPO, working its way down the green line here, the average of all the members, that green line forecast to go down towards neutral conditions, slightly negative 11, 12 February before going back neutral, and then even slightly positive through the 19th of February for the EPO. And then finally, the bottom right shows the latest forecast for the Jeffs V12 PNA, Pacific North American Pattern 30 perturbed member forecast, showing generally, fairly close to neutral conditions right on through the 7th of February, even beyond the 7th, fairly close to neutral right to the 11th of February. Now, PNA is trying to go back negative again after the 13th of February. So again, we're struggling with this right now. We're struggling with the PNA being negative recently quite a bit. And the one exception is right now because we have a major Arctic shot of air coming down the eastern seaboard. But for the most part, it's been a very similar song here, okay, since January. We've seen a negative PNA, which means that, we have more of the trough in favor in the western U.S. and the ridging in the eastern U.S. Now, always the wild card, always fun to discuss, is the Stratospheric Polar Vortex Forecast. This is the latest GFS forecast. Over here on the far left is for 7 February. The middle graphic is the forecast for 12 February. The far right graphic is the forecast for 19 February. Now, what are we looking at on these charts? Blue, green, and purple. Those indicate below normal temperatures, colder than normal temperatures, way, way high up in the stratosphere, up at about 60,000 feet. The orange coloring indicates above normal temperatures. You get this really bright orange coloring, and the whiter color, the lighter brown coloring, and the whiter coloring. Now that indicates significantly above normal temperatures in the stratosphere. All right, so let's take a look at the temperature profiles from departures from normal. First, here on the left, this is the GFS forecast for the 7th of February. We see the polar vortex being displaced. It's basically displaced towards Europe, towards northwestern Europe at this time on the 7th, so that'd be next Tuesday. And we see warmer than normal temps in the stratosphere from central Canada working their way down to southeastern Canada. Okay. As we move forward in time here in the middle graphic, we still see that weakened polar vortex displaced off the pole, still over northern and northwestern Europe. That's going to produce colder temperatures over there. And we have warming occurring. We have another wave of anomalously warmer stratospheric temperatures now over parts of the Urals, as well as portions of Russia. Over here on the far right is the GFS forecast for the 19th of February. We're going a little bit further down the line here, and we're still seeing another warming now. This one's more significant by the 19th of February. Okay, this one's occurring generally over the Arctic Ocean, generally to the north of Russia. And you notice how we lost that weakened polar vortex over here? It's really hard to make out now. And then we have another area of stratospheric warming over Canada at 60,000 feet above the surface. So bottom line here, GFS latest forecast is showing multiple rounds of stratospheric warming from 7th to the 9th of February. Now in the immediate short term, next week specifically, we're going to see the coldest lobe of that vortex situated over northwestern and northern Europe, which should result in a cool down in Europe. It's been a very mild winter over there, mild winter so far, pretty much. If we look at the Jeff's stratospheric polar vortex, let's see if we see any changes from the GFS. We still have a very similar situation here on the left. This is 7 February again. We're seeing the cold displaced lobe of the polar vortex situated over northwestern Europe. So really no change from the GFS. Look, see this? Not much change. Displaced off the pole over northern and northwestern Europe. Now by the time we get to the 12th of February, still in the same location, over northwestern Europe, we do have a little bit of warming occurring similar to the GFS. This one's over northern coast of Russia. And then over here on the far right, we have a much more significant elongated area of warming over the Arctic Ocean and the North Pole, according to the latest Jeff's model. This is from today's 12Z or midday model run. Look how weak this polar vortex is over here, generally situated over Western Europe. So again, Jeff's multiple rounds of stratospheric warming, very similar to GFS, 7 and 19 February. Coldest lobe of the vortex going to be over Europe, resulting in the colder temperatures, especially in these first two images here, between the 7th and the 12th. Now, what about the European model, stratospheric polar vortex forecast? Let's see. This one goes out to 240 hours, by the way, because this is the operational run. Very similar. We have a weakened polar vortex displaced over northwestern Europe on the 7th of February. We have warming temperatures to the west of that over the northern coast of Russia, over Siberia, and then into parts of the Arctic Ocean area and into parts of eastern Canada. And the graphic here on the right shows that continued weakened displaced polar vortex over northwestern and northern Europe And we have warming that is again occurring, a little bit more significant warming by the 12th here. This is the 12th in the far right graphic. A little more significant warming occurring across northern Siberia into the Arctic Ocean area and Greenland. Now, if we look at stuff that ZD Lawrence puts together, this is really great. And you can find this product on stratobserve.com. Really good information. So the first graphic here in the top portion of the slide, we're showing the 10 hectopascals, about 60,000 feet above the ground. We're looking at the 60 degrees north area, that latitude, and we're looking at the zonal mean zonal winds. All right. Here is the zonal winds in meters per second, this vertical axis, the y-axis over here on the left, ranging from negative 30 to positive, just above positive 30. And we're sitting right here where this vertical dashed line is. That's a current date, the 3rd of February. So as you can see right now, if we were to analyze this upper graphic, you would see that our zonal mean zonal winds are generally at about 28 meters per second. Now, each of these color lines represents a different model, and this is the legend for the models. So, for example, the peach-looking line here, that indicates the GFS forecast. The purple coloring line indicates the GEOS 5 forecast. The green line indicates the GFS Ensemble forecast. And the lighter blue or aqua color indicates the Canadian Ensemble forecast. And then this deeper pink coloring indicates the Fleet Numerical Navy Ensemble Forecasting System forecast. And then all the ensemble members are basically in the other green color. Right, so I just want you to pay attention to the trends of these various colored lines, and they represent various forecast models, all the way out to the 19th of February. Okay? All right, so we see where we are today by this vertical white line. We're sitting around 28 meters per second, zonal mean zonal winds. And then generally all the models agree that, hey, we're going to pretty much stay level with those wind speeds, maybe increase slightly to about 30 meters per second. But then you notice this big drop off again, the deceleration of winds after the 9th of February. You see a major drop off here of all these various model projections. We are decreasing our zonal mean zonal winds. Okay. Now, if you look at this GFS forecast, which is that peach line, it goes into negative territory. It dips as low as negative 10 meters per second zonal winds by the 17th of February. So this is the most robust model out of all of them. If you look at the other models, they do have significant decrease of the wind speeds in the stratosphere. Generally below, ranging anywhere from 0 to 10 meters per second. So what we're expecting then by looking at this graphic, when we get a stratospheric warming event and we get a weakening polar vortex, these winds are going to decrease in speed. And if they go to the negative side, we call that a wind reversal. Okay? The winds are going to reverse more to an easterly direction, from westerly to easterly direction. If this actually occurs, we go to the negative values of the zonal winds. So you can see GFS is going like with the most robust solution for a major sudden stratospheric warming, where the winds are actually forecast to reverse to more of an easterly direction, generally after the 14th, after Valentine's Day, right on through the 19th. Regardless, all the models are showing a deceleration or decrease in the wind speeds in the stratosphere. So that's the first thing we look at. Now the bottom graphic here shows at that same height level above the ground, 10 hectopascals or 60,000 feet above the ground. This is the 60 to 90 degree north latitude average temperature for the stratosphere. So what happens here today, where you see this white vertical bar, or the white vertical line here, the dashed line, we see temperatures currently in the stratosphere at 230 Kelvin, right around that area. Now, what happens over time is these temperatures actually cool. Quite a bit of agreement. Notice how the confidence level is high right on through the 5th of February. See how all these different colored model projections are pretty much right on top of each other? That indicates higher probability. Okay. Now, as we move off from the 6th of February, generally out further in time, you notice there's a little bit more of a spread. or spreading apart of these forecast models, these colored lines. And that indicates a little bit more uncertainty in the forecast. But then you notice pretty much all of the model projections are forecasting for warming in the stratosphere. So for example, let's take a look at the peach line again, the GFS forecast. It's showing a max temperature value in the stratosphere at about 237 Kelvin. Whereas the FINMOC, the Navy model, is way down here at the same time period around the 15th of February. It's only at about 227 Kelvin. So we got quite a bit of a range here in mid-February as far as the extent of the stratospheric warming. But we do see an upward trend in all of these model projections to where there is some sort of warming that's occurring in the stratosphere. All right, so this is why we look at this type of stuff. It's great graphics by Z.D. Lawrence, and you can find these graphics at stratobserve.com. So hopefully I explained that well enough now. So now let's move on to some of the ensemble forecasts. Let's start off with the 4 and 5 February time period. We're looking at the European Ensemble, EPS. Here is the 4th. This is going to be basically the morning of the 4th. And you notice this big purple, the circular shape here with the purple colors. That is associated with a tropospheric polar vortex. This is resulting in some extremely frigid temperatures across New England tonight and really Saturday the 4th as well. And those very cold temperatures are going to extend all the way down to the mid-Atlantic. We have ridging across the Intermountain West, and we have another area of troughing, this green coloring, lower than normal heights, into the Northeast Pacific. Notice the absence of any kind of high latitude blocking though. We don't see it on the Atlantic side, North Atlantic side, nor the Northeast Pacific side for the 4th of February. Now, if we move over here to the right, this is the forecast for this Sunday, the 5th of February. And notice how now that purple elongated circular area, how that is now moving off to the northeast and away from New England. And now we have a rebounding, more zonal west-to-east flow of the winds at 18,000 feet or 500 millibars above the ground. We have more west-to-east winds, which is going to greatly modify the air mass. So we're going to go, for example, the mid-Atlantic for tomorrow, the 4th of February, with highs in the 30s. And by Sunday, the 5th, we're already back highs in the 50s. So this tropospheric polar vortex visit was not very long. It has now moved off to the North Atlantic, south of Greenland by Sunday, and now we have more of a west-to-east flow from the Midwest to the East Coast in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the winds. We do see a little bit of ridging over the portions of the Intermountain West by Sunday, and then you see that trough moving closer to the Pacific Northwest coast. Now, the ensemble forecast for the 6th on the left and the 7th on the right of February. So now we have a little bit of troughing setting up by Monday the 6th. It's very weak though. We're not expecting any major deep digging trough to produce very cold air. It's a little bit of a dip in the height contours here across the Ohio Valley, indicating the trough axis. Generally, we're still fairly mild. We might see a bit of a cool down Monday behind the trough axis here. By the time it gets to the East Coast, high temperatures will once again be in the lower 50s on Monday in the Mid-Atlantic. And then we see this ridging, more of a progressive flow, west-to-east flow of the shortwave troughs, the shortwave ridges. We see a shortwave ridge poking itself up across the central U.S. by Monday, the 6th of February. And now we see that trough on shore across the western U.S. Again, note in the North Atlantic and the Northeast Pacific, the lack of high latitude blocking or major ridges. We look over here on the right, the forecast for 7th February. Something happened here, didn't it? Look at the color shading here, the 6th versus the 7th. Look at the bright orange coloring now over Southeast Canada and the Ohio Valley. We have a major building ridge, highly amplified ridge now building from Tennessee northward to Southeast Canada. And that's going to result in even milder temperatures for the eastern and U.S. Mid-Atlantic, New England by Tuesday the 7th. And we see a positively tilted shortwave trough troughing across the Four Corners area. And then we see a ridge upstream of that, generally orientated from the ridge axis from the southwest to northeast across Washington, Oregon State. Still lower than normal heights are indicated by the green coloring here over Alaska into the Gulf of Alaska. Below normal heights are located over Greenland by Tuesday the 7th. Now, Here is the forecast for Wednesday the 8th on the left and Thursday the 9th on the right, showing that similar ridging that's just really taking charge across the eastern seaboard from the mid-Atlantic to New England. We have a lot of mild temperatures. That'll be the result of this ridging. For Wednesday the 8th of February, we have a little bit of troughing here over Texas, and we have ridging again extending southwest to northeast from Nevada right on up to the Dakotas. And then on the right here, we see that ridge still well in place across the eastern U.S. up to the Great Lakes, above normal heights, and very mild temperatures continuing for Thursday the 9th. Ridging is also working its way towards the west coast by this point. Forecast for 10 February on the left, showing that ridging, the bright orange coloring, extending from the mid-Atlantic right through New England up to southeast Canada towards Hudson Bay. And then we have this trough here over Texas, and another ridge poking itself up along the U.S. west coast, and then another trough upstream of that over the northeast Pacific by Friday the 10th of February. And then over here on the right, fast forwarding in time, not as strong of above normal heights here now across New England and southeast Canada. The ridge is weakening a little bit here by this point. We do see troughing over southern Missouri right down to East Texas and Louisiana by the 11th of February. And we also see this ridge progressing, working its way from west to east. Now it's moved to the point of Arizona with the ridge axis extending northward towards portions of western Canada, and a new approaching trough just off the west coast by this point. And we do also see this ridging here trying to develop into the northeastern Pacific by next Saturday, the 11th of February. And then looking at the 12th and 13th of February, we're starting to see more of a storm signal here across the southeastern U.S. by Sunday, the 12th of February. That's next weekend. Notice this little dip here in these solid black lines, these height contours indicating a trough. So we have a little shortwave trough extending from Kentucky, working its way south to the northern Gulf of Mexico by next Sunday, the 12th. We see the ridging being basically moving off to the northeast over the North Atlantic a little bit more by that point as well. And then we also have this ridging upstream over the Intermountain West with another trough, a positively tilted trough off the coast of Northern California by this point in time. We look at the forecast here for the 13th of February on the right, showing that trough digging a little bit deeper now off of Southern California by Monday the 13th. And then we have a little bit more of a flatter ridge look now across the central U.S. And we can have that little bit of that storm signal generally off the North Carolina coast by the 13th of February. But one thing I wanted to point out is, wherever you see the orange coloring, that generally indicates higher than normal heights, which are typically associated with milder than normal temperatures. So we just don't have those blue colorings over here, lower heights, deep troughing at all, upstream of this potential storm. Now, that's going to be a problem if you want winter weather in the east. Even if you get a storm system to kind of move off the coast and kind of brush the coast of the mid-Atlantic to southeast U.S., you're just not going to get much cold air upstream available for it to tap into, and therefore you're most likely going to just get liquid precip with this storm next weekend. I will say these are the 12Z runs from today, the 3rd of February, and it's been interesting to watch these operational runs and compare them. The one here on the left is the European operational, showing a fairly significantly strong I believe that's a 990 millibar low pressure system over southern Jersey by next Sunday, the 12th of February, with a frontal boundary extending south from this area of low pressure just off the east coast. And so in this case, there'll probably be a lot of rain preceding a cold front, and the low pressure is just too far to the north, really, to give you much of a storm system, a heavier precip to the south. And once that front moves through, the drier air will begin working its way in. Meanwhile, the 12Z GFS operation run here on the right, very similar stamping of where that low pressure is 992 millibars on GFS operational. A little bit further to the east by probably 50 to 100 miles, and a much deeper trough. So a much colder situation per the GFS operational midday run today. And it actually shows a rain transitioning over to a snow, even along coastal sections of the mid-Atlantic by the 12th of February. Now, if I were a betting man right now, we're still pretty far out from this, I would probably go with the European model, honestly, as far as the temperature thermal profile. It just, like I said, if we look at the ensembles, there's just not a lot of cold air upstream here for this trough really to tap into. And so most likely what you're going to get is, some prefrontal showers and even some thunderstorms further south, very, very likely by the time we get to the 12th of February. All right, so my final thoughts on tonight's video, after a brief shot of very cold Arctic air, which we're currently seeing here on this Friday evening, the 3rd of February 2023, we're going to see temps quickly rebound on Sunday, the 5th of February. Okay, we're going to see a weak upper trough just move through in a progressive pattern across the Mid-Atlantic and New England on Monday, the 6th of February. Now, there will be a little bit of a, let's see, let me go back here. There will be a little bit of a storm system that's going to develop offshore and generally tend to move to the northeast away from the East Coast. So even over parts of like eastern North Carolina and southeast Virginia, we could see a few showers on Sunday afternoon and evening. Not expecting anything major from that, however. Additionally, we will see an upper level ridge become more firmly established next week across the east. By 7 February, it's going to result in very mild temps right on through the 11th February time period. We could easily see highs in the 50s, and in many cases, specifically for the Carolinas and Virginia, we even could see highs into the 60s on a couple of those days. We will see an approaching trough come in by the 12th of February next weekend, Sunday, and temporarily weaken the ridge. And that's going to result in cooler temperatures, but right now, with that precipitation, it looks to be mainly rain or liquid. Things could change, but I just don't like the look of these ensembles. When you're looking for nice, like wintertime coastal storm systems, you want much colder air upstream here, and you're just not seeing it. All right, now there are differences in the deterministic or operational models today, as I showed you. The GFS has a much colder look with a rain to snow transition across the coastal areas of the Mid-Atlantic and New England, while the European operational model actually looks milder with all rain. At some point next weekend, the 11th and 12th of February, storm signal was showing up, by the way, on the models 48 hours ago as well, on the GFS, the European, as well as Canadian. It dropped off, and now it has since returned today. So something to keep an eye on. There's a lack of upstream cold air, as I mentioned, from the Ensemble graphics. That's going to make it very difficult to see wintry weather here. Unless things drastically change with the upper air pattern across the eastern U.S., it's not looking very good if you want winter weather. There's another round of very mild temperatures expected after next weekend. So as we move now into the 13th to the 17th of February, we're expecting another ridge to build into the eastern U.S. With a trough in the western U.S. And with that ridge in the east, we're expecting mild temps again coming back to the eastern U.S. And I will say that, all signs are pointing to an earlier spring season, as well as possible get ready for the pollen season as well. And then finally, teleconnections and the MJO are pointing to milder eastern temps over the next 2 weeks. La Nina is still stubbornly hanging on. We are expecting that gradual transition to ENSO neutral conditions and then potentially weak El Nino by the fall, as I mentioned earlier. The wild card's always the stratospheric polar vortex, and it's forecast to weaken again. There's model consensus for that weakening, but by how much does it really weaken? And then the GFS is forecasting a wind reversal to easterly in the stratosphere, major decrease in the wind speeds, and greatest stratospheric warming out of all the models by middle of February. So we'll just have to see how this works out. And, if we get a stratospheric warming, does not necessarily mean that, the pattern where we live is going to change. Will there be a troposphere coupling after the warming? In other words, will we see the wave activity go up to the stratosphere, bounce off the stratosphere, come back to the troposphere, or will this just be an absorption event where you just don't get any of the colder temperatures from the loft to come to the surface? And so if we don't see the coupling, we'd be expecting milder temperatures to continue across the east with early spring possible. If the coupling does occur, then things could change to much colder period in late February and early March. A lot up in the air. I wanted to get a video out. It's been a while. Heck, it's almost been about 10 days now, 11 days since my last video. So just want to get this out here to everybody. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, everybody.